What if a simple compliance check escalated into a brutal public humiliation? And what if the secret exposed wasn't one of shame, but of a terrifying, hidden authority that brought hardened soldiers to their knees? The wind at Kodiak Mountain Outpost wasn't just cold, it was a physical predator. It screamed down from the Chugach peaks, carrying ice shards that scoured exposed skin and made every breath a painful, crystalline shock. The air smelled of ozone, pine, and the sterile bite of sub-zero metal. This was the edge of the world, a high-tech fortress carved into the Alaskan wilderness, where generators hummed a constant, low-frequency dirge against the howling gale. In the center of this frozen, controlled chaos, Dr. Evelyn Reed worked with a stillness that seemed to defy the environment. At 30, she looked more like a grad student who'd taken a wrong turn than a top-tier geophysicist. Her oversized, insulated parka and heavy-duty work pants were purely functional, burying her frame. A pair of thick, black-rimmed glasses perpetually slid down her nose, and her blonde hair was crammed into a messy bun under a thermal beanie, with loose strands whipping across her face. She knelt beside a massive, newly installed Deep Strata echolocation array, her movements economical and precise. Her gloved fingers, surprisingly nimble, danced across a control panel, calibrating sensors that would listen to the planet's heartbeat miles below the permafrost. There was no wasted motion, just the quiet, methodical competence of someone who understood that a single misplaced decimal could render $1 billion project worthless. Most of the soldiers stomping past in their thermal gear barely gave her a second glance. Just another civilian specialist, a temporary fixture in the endless cycle of research and development that defined the outpost. They saw the glasses and the focused frown, and filed her away as nerd, egghead, or simply the contractor. But under the heated canopy of the vehicle maintenance bay, four soldiers from a rifle squad had made her their afternoon's entertainment. "Look at her," one of them, a private named Miller, snickered. "Bet she hasn't seen the sun in 10 years. Probably thinks torque is a type of alien." Another chimed in, "Nah, man. She's one of those silent but deadly types. Probably farts equations." The group erupted in gruff, condescending laughter. The man watching her most intently wasn't laughing. Sergeant Kyle Vance stood with his arms crossed, a sour expression tightening his jaw. He was built like a light tank, with a chest full of ribbons from a recent deployment and the swagger of a man who believed his own hype. But his promotion to staff sergeant had been denied last month, a bitter pill he blamed on budget cuts favoring overeducated civilian projects like the one Evelyn was working on. He saw her not as a person, but as a symbol of his stalled career. "You know," Vance said, his voice loud enough to carry over the wind. "I think we need to ensure our guest is following proper data security protocols. We can't have sensitive information walking out the door." One of the younger soldiers glanced at him, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Sarge, she's just calibrating the thing. Command cleared her." "Command clears a lot of people," Vance retorted, already pushing himself off the crate he was leaning on. His boots crunched on the ice-crusted gravel as he started toward her. "It's our job to handle on-the-ground reality. And reality is, that equipment is military property." The others fell in behind him, drawn by the magnetic promise of a confrontation. They fanned out as they approached, not quite encircling her, but creating a wall of uniformed presence that was impossible to ignore. Evelyn didn't look up, but a subtle shift in her posture, a tensing in her shoulders, betrayed that she felt the change in atmosphere. The lone wolf on the ice plain had just realized the pack was closing in. Vance's shadow fell over her diagnostic tablet, eclipsing the pale Alaskan light. Evelyn finally looked up, her blue eyes magnified by her thick lenses, blinking slowly as if emerging from a deep trance. "Ma'am," Vance began, his tone dripping with false politeness. "Sergeant Vance. I need to see your data handling clearance." Without a word, Evelyn reached into her parka and produced a laminated ID badge attached to a lanyard. It was a high-level credential, stamped with clearance codes that should have ended the conversation immediately. Vance took it and studied it with theatrical scrutiny. "Says here you're cleared for geophysical analysis." Doesn't say anything about interfacing directly with the array's core programming. That's a different security bracket. The calibration diagnostics require core interface, Evelyn stated, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. It's in the mission directive. Section 4, subsection B. One of the privates behind Vance snorted. Damn, Sarge. She's got the regs memorized. Vance's face tightened. He wasn't going to be outmaneuvered by a civilian in a rulebook debate. He handed the badge back. Regulations get updated. We have new counterintelligence directives. I need to verify you're not carrying any unauthorized data storage or transmission devices. It's a standard security sweep. This was a lie, and they all knew it. This level of invasive search was reserved for suspected espionage, not routine work. The nearby chatter from other soldiers began to die down as they sensed a line was being crossed. A grizzled master sergeant working on a snowcat engine looked up, his brow furrowed in disapproval. Vance, what in the hell are you doing? The master sergeant called out. Just a routine security check, Master Sergeant, Vance shot back, asserting his authority. Orders from higher. Another lie. Evelyn stared at him, her expression unreadable. What kind of sweep? We need to ensure no devices are concealed in your clothing. Phones, micro-recorders, satellite uplinks. You know the drill. Vance's smirk was ugly. We'll have to ask you to remove your outer layers. Parka, work pants. Standard procedure for personnel in a sensitive data environment. The air crackled with tension. The wind howled, as if in protest. The private named Miller pulled out his phone, shielding it with his hand. This is gonna be good, he whispered to his buddy. Put that damn phone away, another soldier hissed, but Miller just grinned, his thumb hovering over the record button. Evelyn stood there for a long, silent moment, her gaze fixed on Vance. She could have refused. She could have called for the Master Sergeant's intervention, demanded to speak to the base commander. It would have created a bureaucratic firestorm, delaying her work for days. Instead, she let out a quiet sigh, a small puff of white in the frigid air. She placed her tablet carefully on its case, and with deliberate, almost robotic movements, she began to unzip her heavy parka. A collective, sharp intake of breath seemed to hang in the air as Evelyn shrugged off her parka. Underneath, she wore a simple wool sweater. The cold hit her instantly, and a slight tremor ran through her shoulders, but her face remained a mask of stoic indifference. Jesus, she's actually doing it, Miller whispered, his phone now openly pointed at her. Vance's grin widened into a triumphant sneer. He had won. He had broken the quiet, arrogant scientist. The pants, too, ma'am. Protocol is thorough. Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. She unbuckled the heavy-duty work pants and let them fall to her ankles, stepping out of them with the same detached precision. She now stood in the biting Alaskan wind wearing just her sweater, thin thermal leggings, and insulated boots. The humiliation was stark and brutal. She was exposed, vulnerable, a lone figure shivering against a backdrop of hulking military hardware and leering soldiers. Satisfied, Sergeant? She asked, her voice tight but steady. Turn around, Vance commanded, his voice thick with malice. Full 360-degree inspection. As Evelyn slowly turned her back to them, the weak afternoon sun caught the fabric of her leggings, revealing the contours of her lower back. And that's when the atmosphere on the entire outpost shifted. It wasn't a birthmark or a random design. Etched into the skin of her lower back, running up her spine, were 5 distinct tattoos. They weren't colorful ink, they were raised, keloid scars, a pale, silvery white against her skin, forming minimalist, almost brutalist animal figures. A wolf, head tilted as if catching a scent on the wind. A raven, wings half spread, a glint of intelligence in its eye. A coiled viper, poised to strike. A hulking grizzly bear, its shape a promise of raw power. And below them all, so faint it was almost invisible, was the delicate, ghostly outline of a rare flower, a ghost orchid. Most of the soldiers just saw strange tattoos. Miller zoomed in with his phone. "Whoa, check out the tramp stamps. Didn't take her for a wild child." But the master sergeant, the old-timer who'd been fixing engines, felt a cold dread snake its way up his spine. He'd seen tactical markings like that before, in classified briefings about units that didn't officially exist. That's when Command Sergeant Major Marcus Thorne rounded the corner of the hangar. Thorne was a living legend on the base, a man who had fought in every shadow war of the last 20 years. He was holding a high-strength thermal mug, and when his eyes locked onto Evelyn's back, the mug slipped from his grasp. It hit the frozen ground with a dull thud, its dark contents steaming for a second before freezing solid on the concrete. The two junior officers with him froze, following his horrified gaze. "Sweet Mother of God," Thorne whispered, his voice raspy with disbelief. Because those weren't tattoos. They were mission call signs. Unit identifiers from a Black Ops program so secret it had been erased from every server, its operators listed as killed in action a decade ago. Operation Ghost Orchid. A unit created to do the impossible, then vanish. Evelyn Reed wasn't a scientist who had wandered into a military base. She was a ghost who had come home. Vance, still basking in his moment of power, was oblivious. "See anything you need to report, ma'am?" he taunted, gesturing to the other soldiers. But the air had changed. The casual cruelty had evaporated, replaced by a thick, heavy silence. Thorne took a step forward, then another, his boots crunching with a sound that seemed to echo across the entire base. "Vance," Thorne's voice was quiet, but it cut through the wind like a razor. "What in the name of God do you think you're doing?" The sergeant spun around, his face draining of all color as he saw the command sergeant major. The blood drained from his face, leaving a pasty, gray mask of terror. "Sir. Just conducting a routine security inspection, sir. New counter-intel protocols. Stand down." Each word was a hammer blow. Thorne wasn't shouting, he didn't need to. The authority in his voice was absolute, forged in places where a single wrong command meant death. He walked past Vance as if he were a piece of furniture and stopped a few feet from Evelyn. His eyes, which had seen the worst of humanity, were now filled with a profound, almost pained respect. "Ma'am," he said, his voice now gentle. "You can get dressed." She gave a single, sharp nod and began pulling her pants back on, her movements still unhurried, still precise. There was no relief on her face, no anger, no triumph. Just the quiet dignity of a professional finishing a task. Thorne turned his gaze on Miller, who was still holding his phone. "Private. Did you record that?" "Sir, Miller stammered. "You will delete that footage, and then you will hand me your phone. If one frame of what I just saw leaves this base, I will personally see you court-martialed for disseminating classified intelligence. Do you understand me?" "Classified?" Vance blurted out. "But she's just a contractor. Delete it. Now." Thorne's roar finally broke through the quiet. Miller's hands shook so badly he almost dropped the phone. He fumbled with the screen, his face ashen. When Evelyn was fully dressed again, her parka zipped, her beanie adjusted, Thorne stepped closer. "Operation Ghost Orchid was officially decommissioned," he said, his voice a low murmur meant only for her. "Officially," she replied, her voice just as quiet. "Your service records were sealed. You're listed as deceased." That was the point. Thorne studied her face, truly seeing her for the first time. He saw the faint scar above her eyebrow, the way her eyes tracked the movements of every person around her without seeming to move, the way she stood, perfectly balanced, ready to react in any direction. "You're not supposed to be here." "Neither is that echo array," she countered, nodding toward her equipment. "It has design flaws that exist in theory but not in any official report. Yet, Here we are. That got his full attention. He turned to the master sergeant, who was now standing stiffly at attention. Williams, what's her assessment of the array? Master Sergeant Williams swallowed hard. Sir, she's been running diagnostics. Says she's found a resonance frequency drift. Thorne looked back at Evelyn. Explain. Evelyn picked up her tablet. The primary crystal oscillator has a microscopic fracture, likely from transport. It's creating a harmonic imbalance. Your engineers wouldn't find it with standard tests for another 6 months. In 72 hours, it will cause a cascading failure that will render this entire $3 billion array a useless block of ice. I can fix it. But I need to bypass the primary power conduits. Williams and the 2 junior officers stared at her, dumbfounded. They had a team of a dozen world-class engineers who had been unable to isolate the minor glitches they'd been seeing. She had found the cause by herself, in the cold, in a few hours. Give her whatever she needs, Thorne commanded, his voice ringing with renewed authority. Full access. No questions. And I want a security detail posted here, not to watch her, but to keep everyone else away. At 1,700 hours, Sergeant Kyle Vance stood at rigid attention in front of Command Sergeant Major Thorne's desk. The office was Spartan, decorated only with a folded flag in a display case and a map of Afghanistan covered in red marker. Staff Sergeant Mills, Vance's direct supervisor, stood beside him, his expression grim. The meeting was short, brutal, and career-ending. There was no shouting. Thorne spoke in a low, disappointed tone that was far worse than any tirade. He didn't mention Ghost Orchid or classified operations. He spoke of leadership, respect, and the sacred trust between soldiers and the specialists who support them. Vance emerged 20 minutes later, his face a pale, sweaty sheet. The official punishment was severe, 80 days of extra duty, a formal letter of reprimand that would kill any future promotions, and mandatory retraining on the treatment of civilian personnel. But the real punishment was the unofficial one. The next morning, his transfer orders came through. He was being reassigned from his prestigious infantry unit to a remote supply depot on the Aleutian Islands, a place known as the end of the line. It was a career death sentence. The lesson, however, was just beginning to ripple through the base. Thorne didn't let the incident get buried. He used it. At the next NCO leadership briefing, he told a story, a hypothetical scenario. He spoke of a quiet, unassuming specialist who possessed knowledge that could save the entire base, and of a young NCO who, blinded by arrogance, chose humiliation over respect. You never know who you're dealing with out here, Thorne concluded, his gaze sweeping across the room. The person packing your parachute, the cook seasoning your food, the analyst checking your satellite data. You assume they're just doing a job. But they might be the reason you get to go home. Your job is to treat every single person on this base with the respect they've earned by simply being here. Assume they are a hero in disguise. You might be right. The story spread. Master Sergeant Williams made it a permanent part of his orientation for new technicians. He'd point to the massive echo array and tell them about the mysterious female scientist who saved it from catastrophic failure. He'd talk about how she identified problems with a touch and a glance that his best instruments had missed. The legend of the ghost scientist, with the beast totems on her back, became a cautionary tale, a living piece of base folklore about the dangers of underestimation. A week later, a new civilian contractor, a portly, cheerful man in his 50s, arrived to service the base's communication servers. He was met with handshakes, offers of hot coffee, and immediate assistance. The soldiers asked him what he needed, not what he was allowed to do. Something fundamental had shifted in the culture of Kodiak Mountain Outpost. The pack had learned to respect the lone wolf. Evelyn finished her work 2 days later. The echo array was not only fixed but performing at 110% efficiency, thanks to 3 additional modifications she'd made that weren't in any manual. As she packed her small toolkit, Thorne walked her to the helicopter pad. "You don't have to go back to this," he said quietly. I can make a call. Get you a quiet lab, a university position. No more field work. No more dealing with this. Evelyn shouldered her bag and looked out at the vast, white expanse of the Alaskan wilderness, the setting sun painting the snow-capped peaks in hues of orange and purple. My work is out here, she said. In the quiet places. Making sure the things that are supposed to work, do. Whether it's a sensor listening to the earth or a soldier listening to his gut. It's all part of the same system. She gave him a small, rare smile. Besides, those kids need to learn. The quiet ones have stories, too. And sometimes, those stories are the ones that hold the world together. She boarded the helicopter without a backward glance, a solitary figure disappearing into the twilight. Behind her, she left a legacy not of fear, but of profound respect. Her service would remain a secret, her name absent from any official record of heroism. But on a remote, frozen outpost, she had retrained an entire garrison on the true meaning of strength. Excellence doesn't always announce itself with a trumpet blast. Often, it just shows up, does the necessary work, and leaves things better than it found them. Have you ever witnessed someone being completely underestimated, only to reveal a depth of skill or character that left everyone speechless? Share your story in the comments below. We read every single one. Please comment with respect for everyone's experiences. If this story reminds you that true strength often lies in quiet competence, hit that like button and subscribe for more daily stories about the heroes hiding in plain sight. And if you know someone who has ever been judged, dismissed, or ignored, share this video with them. Because sometimes, the most important lessons aren't learned in a classroom, but in the face of quiet, undeniable proof.